All right. What's going on, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. We are on one of our last episodes here of the 2021-22 team previews. After this episode, we only have two more. Today, we're going to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Before we dive into that, I just want to remind everybody to make sure you subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to audio podcasts. And don't forget to throw this video a like. We appreciate that support. But let's dive right into the 76ers. Last season, they were 49-23, which was first in the Eastern Conference under head coach Doc Rivers, which I think that was surprising to a lot of people. People expected them to be better, be improved, but first in the conference is,
Yeah,
to me, a little surprising. I don't know what that says about the rest of the conference, but they were 13th in offensive rating, second in defensive rating, which made a big difference for them. A few other random stats. They were 8th in three-point percentage, the 5th best rebounding team. They were the 6th best team in terms of defending the three-point line, and they were or allowed the 4th worst two-point percentage as well. So very well-rounded defensively, which is not surprising. Their individual season leaders: points, Joel Embiid at 28.5, Tobias Harris at 19.5, rebounds, Embiid at 10.6, Dwight Howard at 8.4, you had Simmons at 7.2, Tobias Harris at 6.8. They had quite a few guys that were up there. Assists, Ben Simmons at 6.9. Steals, you had Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle at 1.6, Danny Green at 1.3. And then blocks, Embiid at 1.4 and Thybulle at 1.1. So, Caveman, who impressed you from last season?
Man, that's the same two names on the season leaders. I'm so shocked.
Shocking.
There are several candidates here, and obviously
Ben Simmons.
I mean, not he did. I mean, no, but I mean he I mean, to talk about Ben Simmons, and we'll obviously get into the Ben Simmons situation, I'm sure, as the episode goes on. But I mean, from the defensive end of the court, he was as good as ever. But his offensive ability, no. Shake Milton's the guy that I want to bring up. Shake Milton. This is a guy where, like, prior to this, people didn't even know he existed. Basically, and I remember last year, me and you were loving some Shake Milton, especially in when we were doing DFS. He was I remember he was literally in my lineup like almost every day.
He was a great value.
He was a great. I think he's gonna be a great value this upcoming season too. Look at 13 points per game in only 23 minutes. What I really love about him is that his role wasn't always consistent. There were nights and there were stretches where they didn't really use him or didn't really need him. But when he was called upon to do whatever the team needed to do, he delivered. And I like seeing those guys that, are ready to be called upon on a moment's notice and produce on any given night when they haven't needed to for like a week or two prior. He really was able to do whatever they needed him to do. And I love seeing guys like that. And he was really, if you look about their best offensive option off the bench too. And the Philadelphia, over the recent years, the 76ers bench has really not been anything. They haven't really gotten a ton of production out of the bench in recent memory. And Shake Milton's the guy where, especially now with the uncertainty of Ben Simmons, Shake Milton is going to play a huge role this season. So he's my pick out of everybody.
Yeah, and he was one for me as well. We talk about, not every episode, but it seems like every episode, having a strong primary ball handler coming off the bench and running that second unit. And I mean, Shake Milton did that. He started a few games. He was successful in that role. So offensively, he was definitely an important piece. And I mean, that's the big question with the 76ers team. Nobody's going to question their defensive ability. It's always going to be, can they score enough to beat the top teams in the league? That's a reality that we have with this franchise right now. So he's definitely one for me. The other one is probably unsurprisingly Matisse Thybulle for me.
Oh, no.
I know,
Oh, no,
shocking,
not a
but
defensive guy.
I know
No
it's funny
way.
though. I guess because he's so strong defensively, he made the all-second defensive team, which probably went under the radar. Only playing 20 minutes a game, which I just find fascinating. Typically, when you see guys make those teams, they're playing 28 plus minutes, but the impact that he had in only 20 minutes a game is pretty outstanding. It's hilarious when you look at his stats because he didn't even average 4 points a game. 44% from the free throw line, 30% from three. I mean, his offensive numbers are not good, and that's what's kept him on the bench right now. Because when you have Embiid and Simmons in your starting lineup, I mean, they really didn't need more defensive help. He was really the anchor defensively of their second team last year, interestingly enough, but he definitely deserves recognition. And the guy that he reminds me of, I think I mentioned it before, but he reminds me exactly of Bruce Bowen when he was with the Spurs. And if you looked at Bruce Bowen's stats, offensive stats, he was pretty terrible throughout his 10 plus years with the Spurs, but he made several all defensive teams. I was curious, he never averaged more than 8 points in a season, Bruce Bowen. So offensively, he never had an impact, but I mean, his defensive impact could not be undermined. But he was playing close to 30 minutes a game almost every season. So I'll be interested, especially you're assuming Ben Simmons is going to be gone at some point. Whether or not that's this season is another question. But I think defensively, they would honestly still be okay because a lot of those minutes will probably go to Thybulle if he's able to carve out more of a role. So that's Thybulle and Shake Milton were the two for me. Let's head over to their offseason. Through the draft, they acquired three players: Jaden Springer at 28 overall, Felipe Petrusev at 50, and then Charles Bassey at 53. Free agent / trade additions: Andre Drummond, Shaquille Harrison, Georges Niang, Grant Ryler. Key losses: I say every single one now, so you don't yell at me. Haywood Highsmith, Dwight Howard, George Hill, Rajon Tucker, Anthony Tolliver, Gary Clark, and Mike Scott. So, I mean, fairly quiet, but overall, what do you think of this offseason?
I mean, honestly, the offseason, their offseason was dominated by the Ben Simmons situation. Anything they did kind of took a backseat to that. It's gonna be an interesting situation. I think when we get to in a minute when we talk about the roster for the upcoming season, we can talk more about Simmons. But the Jaden Springer pick is very interesting to me because of Ben Simmons. Now, if Ben Simmons is missing for a chunk of the season, I'm going to assume that Shake Milton steps in to that starting role, and then behind him, it's really Jaden Springer. He's gonna get some minutes this season.
Forgetting Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, but
Maxey and Milton have both been competing for that starting point guard spot.
But okay, so yeah, either way. I mean, you're gonna see Jaden Springer. He's gonna have a decent role, especially if Ben Simmons isn't there. So he's gonna be an interesting name. The other two guys, they're kind of irrelevant at this point. But Andre Drummond, I mean, that kind of Andre Drummond, Dwight Howard, that's one of those, I think Andre Drummond's a bit younger, probably has the ability to offer you a little bit just more on a nightly basis. He is a little bit younger than Dwight Howard. But other than that, I mean, it was. They're not in a position to do much, especially with the Ben Simmons situation. So it was all right.
Yeah, I mean, salary cap wise, they don't have much flexibility. A lot of money going to even Tobias Harris, Simmons, Embiid. There's just not much to work with behind that. So yeah, I mean, I think Dwight Howard could have a little more of an impact than people realize, just because he brings a lot of energy and just overall leadership coming off of the bench. Maybe skill set wise, Andre Drummond's not a huge drop off, but Andre Drummond is not known for being a high energy, high character player. And I don't want to say Dwight Howard necessarily has been known as a high character, but just high energy. And I think at this point in his career, he's honestly been a pretty good leader wherever he's gone, and he's bounced around quite a bit now here. But I think that that's a move that's underrated and could make a difference. I mean, when you look at their other losses, I mean, none of these guys were consistently in their rotation except George Hill. And George Hill, I mean, they have enough young
They
pieces
have a
with
lot of young. They
Shake Milton and Maxey. They're all, I mean,
got
George Hill
Shake
is more of
Milton,
a luxury.
Maxey. They got Shaq Harrison now, Korkmaz,
Yep.
Stringer. So
Yeah, they have a lot of depth there right now. So really, George Hill was a luxury that they don't necessarily need at this point. So you mentioned the depth chart. Let's review it. We'll talk about Ben Simmons, the combo of him and Embiid, and just where this team stands right now. So in the backcourt right now, they have Ben Simmons and Seth Curry listed as the starters. Behind those two, you have Shake Milton, Tyrese Maxey, Furkan and Korkmaz, Jaden Springer, Shaquille Harrison. Lots of names there. At the 3 right now, they
Isaiah
have
Joe.
Isaiah Joe is actually there too. That was one of their draft picks from the previous season. Um, at the 3, they have Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle listed. Danny Green, always one of my boys. He's still kicking. Is important piece of a very solid squad here. Then at the 4, they have Tobias Harris listed as a starter with George Niang behind him. Then at the 5, you have Embiid and Drummond. So this is a fairly deep team overall. So what do you think of this? Any generic thoughts on it?
I mean, we talked about their backcourt depth already a bit. I think in the short term, I think they're going to be fine if Ben Simmons doesn't play or only plays a handful of games or whatever happens with Ben Simmons. They have a lot of depth to make up for it. I mean, we mentioned they literally go like 5 or 6 guards deep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm now there's no replacing Ben Simmons on the defensive end of the court. You kind of look at all those guys that, I mean, that's aside from really Thybulle, when you talk about all these guards that they have, none of them are defensive specialists. So that defensive end of the court, they're going to struggle, but I think at least in the short term, I think they're going to be fine without Ben Simmons. Now, if they want to win a championship or seriously compete in the Eastern Conference, then obviously they are better with Ben Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
I know the narrative that he can't shoot, but the fact is that you watch Ben Simmons on a nightly basis shut down the other team's best player. It don't matter what position that guy plays. If the other team's best guy is a center, he will go on that guy and lock him down. If he's a point guard, he will lock that guy. He can lock down the opposing team's best player with no hesitation. We saw them. We saw him do it against Trae Young last year in the playoffs. Trae Young could not do squat in that series versus Philadelphia. And that was mainly because of Ben Simmons. So Ben Simmons, extremely versatile on the defensive end of the court. He is such a key to the 76ers defense. Notice all the praise I'm giving Ben Simmons is on the defensive end of the court. As if you haven't noticed. Now he is a great playmaker on the offensive end. That's pretty much all he can do. So I mean, what do you? I'm curious to get. What do you think? Do you think? To me at this point, the relationship is beyond repair with the 76ers.
Yeah.
But especially that relationship between him and Embiid. Embiid really he talked about the situation, but didn't really go insanely in depth. But I think behind closed doors, Embiid just hates Ben Simmons. I really think this situation has kind of soured their relationship. Do you see any scenario where this Ben Simmons situation in Philly could work out in any sort of way, or is this just is this a situation where, and this is my final thought before I kick it over to you, is Ben Simmons going to play just enough so that the 76ers can actually just get a decent package for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what's going on behind closed doors. Typically, when relationships turn this toxic, they don't usually get repaired, especially in sports when a guy like Ben Simmons has a lot of value and somebody out there is not going to pay what reportedly the 76ers want with like 500 first round picks, but he has a lot of value as not only on the defensive end, but he's a great playmaker too offensively. And with his size and length, I don't think he should be a primary ball handler necessarily, but if you're talking about a guy that's your starting four, we'll say, and he can also handle the ball and rebound and be a playmaker, that's where I think he's better served. That's why I wish the Mavericks could find a way to get him because I think him and Luka are a match made in heaven. But Luka, they keep saying needs a second ball handler to take some pressure off of him. Luka's not a great defender. Just from every aspect, it makes sense. So I wish that's a deal that could happen. I haven't heard any reports about that, but yeah, I think it's going to be really challenging. At this point, the 76ers, though, for being honest about it, hold a lot of the cards because I don't think Ben Simmons is the level of player where he can just say, I'm not playing, and another team's going to brush it off. Because as much as he's very talented, he's not James Harden, where somebody's going to be like, I don't care, we want James Harden. I think it's a little different in this case, but I think it's a little sad because I'm in the minority here, but I think Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid could win a championship together.
Oh, yeah,
And most people don't say that anytime you watch ESPN or any other NBA analyst. But if we're looking at the construction of this team, I mean, tell me if I'm crazy here. I don't think they're built that much differently than the Bucks. I
they
think
are
they're
built around Ben Simmons. The thing is, and this is what's frustrating about, they built their team to accommodate Ben
yeah.
Simmons.
Yep, and I like how they do it. They've surrounded him with a lot of shooters, with even guys like Danny Green, Seth Curry. I mean, that's very strategic because Ben Simmons has no ability to shoot the ball, and in order to space the floor, they needed to bring in shooters, and they've done a really good job in doing that. So,
You got the perfect center to go with him with Embiid.
and Embiid. So I don't know. When you look at their top three, and Tobias Harris, who we haven't mentioned, is arguably the most underrated player in the entire NBA. He's averaged over 18 points a game the
I'm still
last
sad.
4 seasons.
I'm still sad the Bucks gave up on him.
Yeah, I mean, he was only there his first 2 seasons and then was gone. But he had the 39th best efficiency rating. He's a great defender, a good three-point shooter, and I feel like he's a very underrated piece. But that's why I feel like the combination of Simmons, Embiid, and Tobias Harris is just as good as the top three that the Bucks just won with. This is a deep team. They have good three-point shooting. One thing that I think needs to be mentioned too with the 76ers is Doc Rivers, I feel like, has a lot of pressure on him right now. That's 2 seasons where his team's really disappointed in the playoffs. And I don't think it's necessarily because the 76ers overachieved in the regular season, but I think losing, and not even losing in the playoffs, but losing to the Hawks specifically, I think really stings because that's a team that should not have upset the 76ers. They're better all around. I mean, at really almost every position, and they're just a better built team. So I think Doc Rivers has a lot of pressure on him. The Ben Simmons situation is on ice right now. All of that makes me really nervous for this season because if we just looked at this team and this depth chart individual, or without considering any of those other factors, I mean, this is a championship caliber team. It really is. They have a championship head coach. They have championship depth. It's impressive that they were a top 7 3-point shooting team with Ben Simmons as your primary ball handler. I mean, that's super impressive. So I think they have all of the elements that you need to win a championship. But when you have this kind of, I'd imagine that locker room right now is, there's a lot of tension right now. And I don't know too many locker rooms that win a championship with tension. So if Ben Simmons, whether or not Ben Simmons is there, I think either way, because I do think Tybal could pick up a lot of defensive slack. This is still, to me, a top 4 team with or without Ben Simmons. I'd have him closer to 4 or 5 without Ben Simmons, but I don't think there's any reason if they're able to clear the air here that they can't be a number 1, number 2 seed again.
Yeah, and that's the reality is, and we'll depend if, let's say, and I don't think Ben Simmons, if he plays for them this season, is going to play the entire year or play a ton. It's kind of going to be a situation where he plays enough to gain some trade value, I think, if that's the scenario we're looking at. And we'll see what kind of, we don't know if they trade Ben Simmons, what players, because it's not just going to be a ton of picks. There's going to be there's going to be a couple players involved, so depending on who they get, that could influence some things. But yeah, with let's say without Ben Simmons there, I mean, I still think at worst they're a 5 seed. I mean, this team is built. Yeah, like I said, this team has championship depth and is built like a championship team. But at the same time, I do think they need Ben Simmons to win them a championship. I don't think this team without Ben Simmons is winning a title.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny to say that because he really did. I don't want to say choke, but he did kind of choke in the playoff last year. So it's ironic that you're not alone in saying that they need him in order to win a championship, but he was horrendous in that series against the Hawks. He only took 6 shots a game. He wasn't overly effective as a playmate. Everything offensively was just a wreck. And you could tell when the spotlight was on him, he wanted to be as far away from the spotlight as possible. And I don't know, that's concerning for a primary ball handler to me. That's why.
That's not going to happen in Philadelphia, I'll tell you that right now.
That's why I don't know.
You ain't going to get away from the spotlight in Philly. You might as well go to, like, freaking Sacramento or something.
That's why both Portland and Dallas make a lot of sense, honestly, because he can be in as much as he's in. It's odd to me because Joel Embiid is more important and the better player, but I feel like it's always been Embiid and Simmons. I feel like people still aren't looking at Embiid on a different level, where if he was in Dallas or Portland, he would clearly be in Luka's shadow or Damian Lillard's shadow. So we've mentioned both those teams a few times, but I think it's funny that everyone's like, he's so important to them winning a championship. And you could argue he was one of the reasons they didn't advance last year.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's kind of that. That's the reality. They need Ben Simmons, but at the same time, I personally think they should move on. They should get rid of Ben Simmons as soon as they can. Get some picks, get pieces, and try to go forward with Joel Embiid as the main centerpiece and all these guys around him. And that team, like we said, without Ben Simmons, this team's still top. I think this team's still a top half team in the East, and I'm not saying they're gonna win the championship, but they can definitely make a run.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, sometimes in situations like this, it's Philadelphia, and I'd imagine whenever Ben Simmons plays and if he suits up for him, he's going to get the crap boot out of him. The Philly market does not respond well to guys like this. So, and I think after that series and the way he was criticized and the way he kind of just broke apart, sometimes you just need a fresh start if we're being honest about it. So from Ben Simmons' standpoint, from Philly's standpoint, it makes sense to move on long term. I think in the short term, it hurts a little bit because maybe Philly's championship aspirations are pushed back. But at the end of the day, long term, it just makes sense to move on.
Mhm.
So, all right, I think that's it for the 76ers. We have 2 teams left, the Phoenix Suns and Utah Jazz, which are 2 interesting teams to me because they were the top 2 teams in the West, and literally nobody is picking them to come out of the Western Conference this season. So I think that'll be 2 interesting episodes. So if you don't want to miss those, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you throw this video a like. But we'll see you guys next time.